Hey, all you beautiful Ethicuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be every Thursday at noon Eastern. If you think fixing our workplace can fix our world, let's get a massive round of applause, a massive emoji explosion for this phenomenal treat I have for you. There's no doldrums of summer around here. You know what I mean? We just keep coming with hit after hit. We have the one and only Hema Lomax, the one and only Chelsea Azrak, and we are going to be talking about decision intelligence gap. So every organization knows the things that they should do. They know what a good decision is on paper, but far fewer can have high reliability that those right decisions are going to be made at 4:59 on a Friday. And so when the pressure is on in our organizations, the making that right choice is anything but easy. So we know what this gap is between what we should do and what we actually do. And this is the decision intelligence gap, which we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be digging into what happens, why it happens, what to do about it with two people from every single angle. So if you guys don't know Chelsea and Hema, welcome to Earth. These two are absolutely phenomenal. Chelsea was recently on the podcast and one of my favorite episodes ever. So we have a real treat. So as we get started, I'm going to go through a couple of quick announcements. Drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat. You got to keep building this network. I'm telling you, it's not going to build itself. Your network and your net worth are both too small. So you got to grow both of those. Okay. And also drop in where you're coming from today as I introduce this forthcoming book from the one and only Hema Lomax called The Decision Intelligence Gap. So Hema's written a bunch of books. Every single one of them are sitting on my bookshelves. And I always learn something just from even just a chat with Hema, having dinner with her. I always leave invigorated. I have a great new perspective. She's extremely smart. So if you want to win this book, you better get active in the chat because we're going to be giving away 5 of those today. And if you don't want to get active in the chat, we're giving away unlimited benchmark reports. So if you have not downloaded the benchmark report, there's a link on the console right now. And you should definitely download it and just take a quick peruse through it, take a spin through it. And I guarantee you're going to find some nugget in there that's going to help you build a better program and drive more impact in the organization, because that's really what this is all about. I'm still getting feedback on Ethicsverse Day. I'll come back to this in a second. I'm still getting phenomenal feedback, DMs about Ethicsverse Day for people that missed sessions that were watching the replay on our YouTube channel. I love you, and I also would love for you to open up a new tab, go over to YouTube and follow the Ethico YouTube channel. All the replays of our world famous podcast, our world famous Ethicsverse are on there. Thanks to Chase. Round of applause for Chase, the man behind the scenes. Those are on there all the time. Chase just gave himself a round of applause if you can believe it. Okay. So there's a lot of great content on there. If you missed any of those recent episodes, I would definitely encourage you to check out Ethicsverse Day replay and also check out the Ethicsverse or the Ethicsverse Day toolkit. There's 20 different tools in there across all, tied to all the different sessions we did. And so you definitely want to check that out. And if third-party risk, Hema actually helped a lot with the development of this, although she would never take credit. We launched Third Party Plus. This is our new third-party due diligence, third-party risk management platform that allows AI to do the work and your team to make the decisions. There's a lot of waste in terms of wasted effort, wasted time in this process that contains a ton of different risk, right? As our supply chains have become more and more fractalized, you're still responsible for knowing what's going on with your vendors and what's going on with your third party. So we put some really cool AI functionality in this to let you monitor at real time to kind of solve for this patchwork of a process that's very manual. So if you're interested in checking that out, please do reach out for a no pitch zone demo. Listen, Ethico may be the right company for you. They may not be the right company for you. And by they, I mean we. But at the end of the day, it's on you to make sure that your team has the right tools. So if you'd like to see what is out there, we'd be more than happy to show you how we might be able to partner. Okay, with that, we're almost at 1,000. I love getting started. I like to hit 1,000 emojis before we dive in here. But let's get a massive one more welcome to the one and only Hema and the one and only Chelsea. How are you guys doing today?
So happy to be here, Nick. Thank you for having us. And I really enjoy spending time with Chelsea as well. So we're going to have some fun today.
Yes, thanks so much for having us, and welcome to everyone for joining.
Yeah. All right, so let's just kind of dive in. This is a really cool topic. We're going to be talking today about why organizations that clearly define their values still struggle. A lot of us talk about values, but like many times we still struggle on how to act on those consistently, kind of across our stakeholder group. Why ethical decision making breaks down in real world pressure, and how to really embed integrity in this sort of concept of invisible compliance, how to really embed integrity in the flow of everyday business. So that's a really cool topic. This is kind of like the last mile for an ethics and compliance program to get it sort of black belt? How do we make ethics and compliance and the guidance that we need to provide to our stakeholders, how do we make that invisible, and how do we make it instant? So Emma, maybe I'll start with you. When we talk about the decision intelligence gap, like what do we mean by that, and why does it persist even in organizations that are mature, that are well-resourced, that have actual compliance teams, that have those tools and those platforms?
Oh, thank you for asking. It's one of my favorite topics right now. So you're going to see me getting excited about this. But the decision intelligence gap, as you've articulated it, is the distance between your intent and your operational reality. And what I've noticed is it's really fertile ground that we should all maybe spend some time exploring. And you said dig a little, dig on the decision intelligence gap. There's a little bit of a pun in there because it spells dig. But digging is important because what we don't often do is make our reasoning between intent and operational reality inspectable, even to ourselves. That's the big unlock in a way, and it's really timely, I would say. I'll be the first to mention AI today. Lots of us are thinking about how we can export our decisions, our human decisions, into tools like AI frontier models. And we talk a lot about judgment, this idea of human judgment, and where is that, and the nuance. But human judgment is not an intangible thing. It really is something we have to inspect and understand ourselves before we can even deign to export it at scale into an AI tool. So it's a really good time for us to stop a moment and think about what it is we're doing in that gap, and what pressures, to your point, what factors, what things influence those decisions in that moment. I'll just say one other thing. We tend to focus a lot, us enlightened compliance professionals, on the conditions in which people make decisions. And so that's where our policies come in, our FAQs, our Waze navigation style chatbots. We love these things, but the conditions are never going to be perfect. We're going to always have to navigate uncertainty. And so the really interesting thing I want to forage around in this field is, what does that mean when we say we're going to help you navigate uncertainty and help you get where you want to go, knowing that you're never going to be 100% confident that you're going to get what you want? So that's really the space that I'm interested in exploring with you all today.
Thanks for that, Hema. So Chelsea, when we're thinking about like a very mature organization, why do you think that this intelligence gap persists?
Yeah, so I think building on something that Hema just touched on, which is employees often encounter situations that their policies may not clearly address, right? That's one. Two is sometimes policies, procedures are long, not accessible, and not easy to navigate, right? So you're in a high pressure situation at 4:59 on a Friday. Didn't we have a policy that covers this? I'm not sure where to go for it. I don't have time to read a 20-page policy. And so I think even though a program might be, A+ and the policies may be A+, maybe the policies don't translate into practical real world situations where there's urgency built in.
Yeah, I mean, there's just you can't kind of articulate every single scenario or every single sort of gray zone that someone is going to kind of encounter in their day-to-day work, exactly to the point both of you made. And I think, I'd love for you to kind of weigh in on this. Like, is that an opportunity or is that a threat? I think there's a lot of, looking over the fence, so to speak, in our industry. There's a lot of thinking, these other programs they have, the grass is greener in all these other programs. And then in my little old program, I'm still struggling with this stuff. What do you think about the persistence of this, the existence of it, I guess I should say, across programs? Because you guys have worked in small and large and growing and shrinking programs over your careers. Is the existence of this an opportunity for us to kind of drive more impact, or is it kind of a threat to our existence? Not to get too existential on this Thursday afternoon.
No, but it's your decision intelligence operating right now, Nick. Look, I'm definitely team opportunity, and I will tell you why. This isn't just about compliance. This is about decision making writ large. One of the things I realized today is we often say the only constant is change, and I've realized that I've modified that a bit now. The only constant is uncertainty. Let that land for a second. You're never going to be 100% certain of everything. You take a risk, that's called risk tolerance in our world, but you take it all the time. So let me give you a nice little story. You've got kids, Chelsea's got kids, I've got kids, so let's stick with this for a second. I've got 2 little girls. I always say I'm a terrible compliance mum, because when they ask me, Mummy, why can't I cross the road? I say, because you'll die. I tell them the threat, and that's the end of that, because it's the easy, short answer to just don't do it. Sounding familiar? I don't know. Let's see how the audience feels about that. So what does that produce when it comes to my children? It produces two children, one of them who will never cross the road without mummy, and the other who will always cross the road when mummy's not looking, and probably really fast. Think about that for a second. If we keep saying no, that's what we're doing with our employees as well. We're creating two types of employees: the renegade, reckless ones that are trying to do a thing because they've got skewed incentives, and the others that have the same incentives but really respect us and wait for us. And then agency to decide, agency to keep moving forward goes. We really need to think about that. Those questionnaires we used to have, questions at the end of compliance training, which was 4 answers, and it was stupid answer A, stupid answer B, stupid answer C, and ask compliance D. We've been think about what we've been doing there. And so there's an opportunity, a big opportunity for us to lean in now and see what we can do to create high quality decision making. And I'm being very specific there. I'm not talking about high quality decisions, not for a second. Why? Because if we focus on the decisions, we always reverse engineer our assessment of the decision making. What I'd really like to see us doing is developing a decision muscle, which encourages us to make high quality decisions. That does mean thinking about what the operating conditions that are affecting our decisions. It means being clear about what we're optimizing for. And crucially, it means being open to thoughts about that, a bit of coaching, a bit of ideation together, so that we're not flying solo. And there is the opportunity for us to make sure that we're coming in, guiding, supporting that, bringing the right expertise in the room, but not managing every decision. And so back to the metaphor, do we want to be at the curb with our employees for every decision they make? We can't.
No.
We want them to be able to figure out how to cross that road safely, swiftly, strategically on their own, and only come to us when it's the mega highway or the bridge is broken, but not every routine decision that they need to make. So that's something we need to think about. It's very good for us, for our profession. We're good at this. We do know about risk tolerance. We do know about, if it's red on the traffic light, come to us. And if it's green, please go. We know these principles, but it tends to be in the operational reality is we get very risk averse and we tell them, my shortcut, just don't do it because you'll die.
Yeah. And then the mechanism for influence is fear only. And the result is kind of this codependent relationship that is by its nature very slow and is by its nature very low agency at the decision maker's point,
Exactly. And again, look, we all say we don't want to be the office of no. That's our intent right out there, blaring sign. I want to be the office of unlocking responsible growth. But then you start to examine how I do that. I have to ask myself, well, what else am I optimizing for? And if I'm optimizing for what I think the regulator might want, you talked about third-party governance, it's up on the screen, then I'm probably not optimizing for high confidence in the partners I actually choose.
Right. Man, that's a great point. I'm going to start with you, Chelsea, on this question, and then Hema, I'd love for you to jump in as well. You guys have spent years building programs. You guys were both attorneys before this. I want to talk a little bit about what you've learned, and this is not from a compliance perspective. This is just from a human perspective. What have you learned about the moments before misconduct? Was it usually a decision that someone made badly, or was it a decision that nobody even kind of realized they were making? What commonalities have you seen about that sort of moment right before that, that mess, the decision was made that sort of caused that mess? Let's start with you, Chelsea.
Yeah. So I think there are those cases, of course, where it's sort of intentional misconduct, and anything that you do as a compliance officer or as a manager or, as an executive of a company is not going to really make a difference, right? They're choosing to do something they're not supposed to do. But it's that other bucket of cases that makes things more interesting and allows us to learn, right? Where they do something, they engage in some maybe unintentional misconduct or misconduct that was, actioned under something we were talking about earlier, which is some urgent circumstance where they really don't know what the right thing to do is. They're getting pressure from their, supervisor to achieve a certain KPI or a goal or something like that. And they just do it because they don't have time to jump through the hoops, right? Or they really, sometimes I'll look at investigation, allegations or data, and I'll say, how did they not know about this policy, right?
Right.
And I know about the policy because I wrote the policy, right? Or I revised the policy, or it's come to me in one way or another. But a typical employee, unless you are making things very easy for them to read and review and understand, accessible to them, and then applicable to their everyday life by giving them examples and cheat sheets and tables that they can find easily, that's where the issues arise. When they're not really sure what to do, they don't know who to escalate it to, and they're under that 4:59 on a Friday pressure to make those decisions.
As you were kind of describing this, I was thinking, like, where is this discussion in the sort of life cycle of a program? Okay, so there was a point in time where people were cavemen. Were they worried about feng shui? Like, is this a feng shui thing, or is this like a sustenance thing? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it like when you're first, I don't know, I love the show Naked and Afraid. They're not like feng shuiing the bomas that they're building on the Sahara. Okay. Like, they're just trying to like survive. And kind of, I liken that to getting your base sort of fundamental like components of your, ethics and compliance program built. What we're talking about is like, I'm asking for your perspective. Like, is this like, okay, well, this, these throw pillows don't look good in this room anymore? Or is this really foundational to like how you start to think about your program? Like, is this a day one, is this like a BOMA thing, or is this a coffee table thing?
I have a view on that, if I may, Chelsea. So, and I want to answer the question on it. So let's circle back to the other question, because I think there's some interesting things there that Chelsea said that I want to follow up on. But on that question, I think it's foundational return to who it is to being a human. It's literacy. This is not even about compliance, and this is about how humans move forward, how we make decisions. So I do think it's foundational. I don't think it's necessarily about compliance, but look, we have a really privileged position as compliance officers to think about how we might be creating the conditions inadvertently for the pressure. And Chelsea explained it beautifully. Like, if we're telling them there's a rule and you could be fired if you break it, but the rule's not clear or accessible or even fit for today's purpose. And that's one thing I wanted to say in response to your first question. Chelsea covered the cognitive internal pieces, the pressures and the conditions really well. But what if we need the organization to be designed to learn? And if it's not designed to learn, that's what causes rule breakers. Because as I said, there's going to be some that are going to run fast because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for today. One challenge I would ask for the audience is, are we doing compliance programs that are fit for today's company, or are we helping the company get to tomorrow? Now, in that is a lot of uncertainty. It's not going to be fit for purpose. The roads have changed massively since the cave days. Let's put it that way, to use your metaphor. And that lesson for my children back then would not be fit for purpose. The 70s era risk management is not fit for 2026. And so we have to be able to move with the business, move with the uncertainty. Isn't the most beautiful thing about a successful company the risks they took, the big bets they took that paid off? Those are not the risks that Chelsea mentioned, not the really, really bad stuff. I'm saying you had to move forward not knowing if the bet would pay off. And we are really reluctant as compliance professionals as a field to sit with that unease, to sit with that uncertainty. And then what's the word? If we have an insecurity, we then export that to our employees. We amplify their survivor brain even more. We have a survivor brain, we amplify their survivor brain. Suddenly, many, many of them are afraid to do anything without sign off. And we set the incentives up that way. What we need to do is something different, which is bring the activation energy down so we can think under uncertainty and make high quality decisions. Again, a high quality decision-making process, which, by the way, allows you to have bets that fail. One thing we don't do very well, right? We don't do very well is take the bet, fail, and say, you know what, didn't get the outcome we wanted, but that was a high quality process that you used. Good job. What we actually do is the opposite. We punish the outcome and assume the process.
Wait, what do you mean by that? You punish the outcome and assume the process?
So, for example, something goes wrong. It looks like a policy violation or a code of conduct violation. An investigation will go, have a finding, and then that person's labeled as someone that broke the policy. Maybe they broke the policy because the policy is not fit for purpose, but we take them in that moment in time. Maybe they broke the policy because it wasn't clear. We take them at that time. Maybe they didn't break the policy, but we don't have enough investigative power to get to the truth. We just get to the best right thing, and we label them in a certain way, even though what we really need to do is ask ourselves, does this process help us learn anything? And again, this profession is wonderful for this because we know continuous improvement and learning from the thing is our goal. But I don't think I'll be the only one. Sorry, Chesa. I think I'll be the only one that doesn't get there, right? We sometimes just don't get to that. Sorry, Chesa, go on.
No, that the last thing you said really struck me, because I think what we do sometimes as compliance officers is we focus on, the investigation at hand and the discipline for that employee that, may have violated a policy. We may take that extra step to separately maybe revise the policy, retrain on the policy for the employee base at large, but we may not go back to that employee who we disciplined to explain to them what happened, why we think they may have violated the policy, and give them a little bit of grace, for lack of a better term, for maybe not understanding it because maybe the policy wasn't trained on well enough, right? So I think we separate the two, and you bring up a great point, which is maybe we need to combine the two.
Yeah, and there's an inherent assumption that's applied to the scenario that you're both kind of referring to. And that inherent assumption is like, well, we have a policy. So that's kind of like the independent variable. The dependent variable then is the behavior in this sort of like framework or this kind of construct, when the independent variable could be that it, to your point, that it wasn't a fit for purpose policy or it wasn't trained right and so forth. And to circle back to this thing, if we are always assuming that, we're right and everybody else is wrong, or we have this sort of consistent fear, this sort of catastrophic, catastrophizing type of mentality, then there's no room in your mind to even think that, well, maybe this wasn't fit for purpose, or maybe this training wasn't right, or maybe this, it's harder to kind of, to your point, Chelsea, to like apply that, assumption of positive intent or give that kind of grace to really zoom out and look at the process. And I think that's something that a lot of us in this space kind of struggle with, because there's a lot of black and white thinking in this space. And there's a lot of like inbounds, out of bounds, right? And there's absolutely a place for that. But there's also a bunch of things that, to your point, from before, Hema, business is moving faster. The compliance program of the 70s probably doesn't apply today for a number of different reasons, not just from a technology standpoint, but from a way people kind of assume, want to do their work. And although, becoming a learning organization, that was not something that like my grandfather's company was concerned about, right? They were concerned about a whole number of different things, how they kind of build a victory garden or something like that. So I want to circle back though to you, Chelsea. Do you think that like this is feng shui or this is foundational, this kind of decision gap, decision intelligence gap, architecture or thought process as you're kind of building? Because I can just imagine that a lot of people in the audience are like, I would love to kind of solve that intelligence gap. I got to get these base policies built. I got to get these I got to change my vendor on this, like this kind of sort of core pillar of my program. How do you think about it and how do they balance it?
Yeah. So I think maybe it's a little bit of both, but I do go back to the foundational answer, which is, if you want to build a compliance program and take a step back and say, I need to build these policies, you should be building the policies based on, right, your business need and your business reality, right? And what's important to your company at the time and the risk, right? The risk appetite of your company, sort of with the backdrop of the regulatory and legal environment, right? And so building these sort of practical guidance tools into your policies will foundationally make them more digestible to your employee base. So while I do think it's foundational, I think once you have the foundation, and maybe you need to relook at that foundation, right? And say, we have the policies we need, right? We're a mature organization, but maybe these policies are not reaching the employees in the way that they need to, so that when it's 4:59 on a Friday, they understand what they need to do and where to find them and have that like quick decision-making guidance.
That's great. Hema, you said something about, this risk tolerance thing. And you said something about like, that does not mean, you said something like, it's not about making bets that fail or something, right? Like, it's not about making every bet pay off. It's about having a broad sort of expected value for the bets that you make and having some room for that kind of failure. And I think many times in this industry, we conflate risk with calculated risk. And of course, all else equal, we would like less risk. But very rarely are you able to get any kind of return without some kind of risk. It's really about mitigating the risk or maximizing the return in the context of the risk that you're able to like take on. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, every hedge fund that's out there that, these world-class kind of top decile hedge funds, it's not like every single trade that they make pays off. on balance, most of them pay off to generate those returns to keep them in that top decile. But those people that are, trading on an account or, trading on a hedge fund, they're comfortable taking on risk and having stop losses in place and saying like, okay, I'm going to make this bet. And at this point, I'll know if it's not working, in which case I have to kind of cash that out and bet somewhere else. So I think the more we can absorb that kind of thinking, the easier it is to kind of achieve this sort of elusive concept of continuous improvement, because you can't improve anything without changing it. And it's not like every single change you're going to make is going to work out. There's a lot of freedom in sort of this calculated risk for, framework. What do you think about that?
Oh, I got so much to say about that, Nick. Thank you. Look, you mentioned hedge fund activation energy goes up because people don't trust hedge funds, right? You mentioned AI, same thing. I want to answer Wade's question in the chat in a bit about AI. But before we do, let's do a quick jurisprudence lesson. Anyone know what the business judgment rule is? I know you can't answer me, so I'm going to go ahead and share a little bit of what I know about that. So the business judgment rule is a state, I think it's a Delaware corporate law rule, which says the shareholder price might go down on a big bet, but we are not going to punish the directors or the CEO, the C-suite, if they can show a well-reasoned business judgment on the basis of the available information to them at the time. Interesting. What they're saying is, if you can show inspectable good reasoning, we're not going to punish the output, the bad bets. Obviously, they're incentivized to take good bets, best bets they can, but they're not going to be so paralyzed that they won't ever take bets. So the jurisprudence already recognizes it for directors and the C-suite, so the executives. So why don't we use that for our employees? Why don't we say to them, if you can show high quality reasoning for what you did, some of you will think of business justification memos that you use for gifting. If you can show it, that covers us if the bet goes wrong. Now that makes sense because we know we can't guarantee that the bet will go right. Stop thinking you've got 100% odds. You don't, ever, with anything. So if we could start pricing the odds, explaining the odds, explaining why we're okay with those odds. I had this the other day where we took a big bet, my team member and I asked him, how confident are you? And I was overconfident. I was like, 110%, we should do this. And he said 95. And I'm like, oh, 95? What's the 5? Of course I did. My insecurity was like, whoa, there's a 5? Let's talk about the 5. And he said he reminded me of something that one of our dear friends, Jonathan Aroney, he's a lawyer at Shepherd Mullin, said to us, which is don't think there's ever 100% certainty. There's always something, right? There's always something. And you've just got to make sure you're okay with that. So I said to my team member, right, well, what is the 5? And he told me that. Well, the 5 is just that you can't ever really be certain. I'm like, oh, good point, well made. Next question. Are you okay with the 5? Yeah, the 95 is pretty good if it pays off. And we went forward. We inspected our reasoning. We priced in the risk. We did our risk tolerance and we went forward. And you know what's even more beautiful about that? The 5 has materialized so far. We're not sure if the story's not over yet, but we're in the 5 and we're okay with that. Just like, sorry to use gambling, but when you gamble on odds and you lose, you're somehow okay with it because you knew the odds. They were transparent to you. They were inspectable to you. So I think that's something we need to think about, that we need to just make the reasoning inspectable. And then this is a beautiful segue, if I may, Nick, to Wade Harvey's question in the chat. It was at 12:21, so you have to scroll up for it. He said, how would you convince others that AI isn't just throwing a dart at the dartboard, blindfolding, rather than human with a pause and discerning unique situations? Great question, very relevant. We're into AI. AI is like hedge funds, no one trusts it, but let's go there, right? Let's go there. Let's use my example. If AI's reasoning were inspectable to itself and to us, if we were designed to learn from the reasoning, take the bet, learn, what could I have done differently? What should I have done the same? What would make no difference whether I changed it or not? It would be designed to learn. So I'm saying AI needs to be designed to learn and humans need to be designed to learn. We're good at this when we're little. Someone else I think mentioned toddlers. I think it was Michelle Nedjdi. Absolutely why, that's how we learn. What's the question a toddler asks? Why? Interesting, toddlers designed to learn. Also, when our toddlers try to walk, and they fall down the first time, we don't say, see, walking, not for you.
Right.
We don't say,
Great
I'm labeling
point.
you a non-walker. Oh, my kid's so cute, but they're a non-walker. No, we let them learn. Take a risk, walk, try and mitigate it, right? Remember meet, mitigate, eliminate, accept, transfer. We do a few things. We take away that sharp-ended table or we put a little corner on it. We mitigate it by watching them. We put gates around. We do all the things that compliance professionals should do. But we do not try to walk for the toddler and we do not stop it from falling before it learns to walk. It's designed to learn in a safe space. And that's what I think we need to create for ourselves. First, a safe space between intent and output. And dare I go further, if you'll indulge me, Frankl, The Meaning of Life, he talks about it. He talks about it in the context of the Second World War. He talks about the gap between intent and uncertainty. Think about that. We need to think about what we can do in that gap. So I get very excited. I told you I would, but we really have an opportunity here to answer your question of spending time in the gap, making AI and human reasoning inspectable, taking that bet that the Delaware courts gave us, which is it's okay to get it wrong as long as you have high quality decision-making. And how do we get high quality decision-making? Back to Wade's question, we make it designed to learn, and we increase our standards of confidence in our decision-making ability under uncertainty.
I think it takes a certain intentionality, and I'd love for you to weigh in on this, Chelsea. I think it takes a certain intentionality and a certain drive to like become a learning individual. Because we're not toddlers anymore, right? Toddlers have this really kind of steep learning curve, and they're just acquiring all this information. It seems like at some point in our lives, it kind of like will level out because you feel like you've seen it all or whatever. I think it takes an intentionality to become a learning individual, and it takes an even kind of maybe greater intentionality to, I'm not even talking about a learning organization. I'm talking about maybe your department, turning your department into kind of a learning organization. And in my first job, the smartest guy I worked for, he had this like ritual where after every single project or along the way, every single day, he would take some notes about what he learned that day. And at the end of a project, he would, spend 20 minutes like adding things that he learned. And his pattern recognition was like so high. He was like leaps and bounds. He was a whole level above the other partners that, I worked for. But that was a function of not just that he was smart, but that he wanted to really kind of lean into that. And there's this great book by Ray Dalio, who is a famous investor at Bridgewater Associates. And his book Principles, one thing I love about compliance is that you can pull from so many different areas. In his book, Principles, he talks about the methodology that he used at Bridgewater Associates to turn that organization into a learning organization and to really kind of document, well, what bet are we making? What assumptions are we making before they made a decision? And then being able to go back on a postmortem basis to see like, well, what did we get right and what did we get wrong? Chelsea, I want to come to you on this other question from Taylor, because this kind of related back to what you were saying, where it's kind of a balance of, is it kind of foundational or is it kind of ongoing, from a couple minutes ago. So thanks for this question, Taylor. What do you do? Here's the question starting. What do you do when, what do you do when you provide your employees all the information, such as cheat sheets, QRGs, SOPs, all of the things, and they still do everything wrong? They know they can come to me to ask questions, but they ask the field, and everyone has a different answer. So this is kind of a complication for kind of some of the stuff that you described. Presumably I'm putting out the policy, I'm putting out the cheat sheets and the infographics, and I'm kind of doing that sort of thoughtfulness. And yet I continually see my, stakeholders go to somebody in the field and get this sort of bouquet of answers.
Yeah. So, I think there's a few things you can do. And this goes back to your question about, is this opportunity, or I don't know what the other option was, but I think there's an opportunity for us as compliance officers to help the employees in real time, right? So embed certain prompts or, decision-making lanes or links where decisions occur, right? So I want to renew a contract with a vendor. In that renewal process, there's a prompt that says, did the adequate due diligence requirement, did you conduct adequate due diligence? Or, is this third party engaging with the government? Yes or no? Yes. Did you get compliance pre-approval for this, right? So sort of embedding, creating real-time prompts in the decision-making process to remind employees, I think is super important. If they don't have to go back and find the SOP or find the cheat sheet or find the policy, and it can be made part of their workflow, then I think all the better, right? It's those reminders to help employees learn when this happens. I'm reminded that I need to, check this box or, complete this form or something like that, in order to help them with those decisions. Sorry, that wasn't the most eloquent answer, but it's basically building it into the workflows so that it sort of reminds them and forces them to do what they need to do, and they don't have to sort of remember it on their own.
Well, you're kind of working back from like where this failure was, right? The failure is somebody at that decision point going to somebody around them, as opposed to going back to this cheat sheet or to this infographic or to the policy itself and saying like, okay, well, how can I solve this sort of systemic problem, as opposed to saying it's just the employee's fault. It's there. Many times the outcomes we get are a function of the system that,
right,
those components are a part of. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to be a product of your environment to some degree. The decisions are going to be a function of that system that is built, that everyone's kind of existing in. What would you add to that, Hema? I thought it was very eloquent, by the way. Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What do you think, Hema?
No, and again, so many thoughts here. Look, if anyone knows anything about me, I love the Waze analogy. I love the driving analogy. Get the stuff to people in real time, like a Waze GPS system. Let them crowdsource the impact of the decision or what they're seeing out on the roads back to you. This is really important. The way that we create the conditions of knowledge transfer, but also, as I've put in the chat so I wouldn't forget it, practical wisdom, right? Practical wisdom. You don't have to follow every prompt that you're given by Waze, but you get the information that's decision useful for you to make the decision on the road you're on. That's really important. And we have to be thoughtful about that. I'm going to pick on a word Nick used because he said, blah, 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 the failure. We have to be thinking about why we're calling it failure and what that means. If you're like me, failure gets you excited because it's information. What information is the system telling us, as you kind of said, Nick? The system's telling us something that we should use, not just that person failed, that person's a failure, they don't listen, they won't do what we tell them. That's the mindset we have to kind of lift ourselves out of, that we're not here to mandate, to dictate. We're not just the police. We are helping people at the curb make good decisions, better decisions, increasingly higher quality decisions to do the thing they need to do. I had a couple colleagues ask me when I was talking about this at work, well, what about the floodgates? If we let everybody cross the road without us, how do we control them? And then we have to inspect that question. If you think about that, well, firstly, do you really want to be at the curb? Does mummy have to be there holding the hand for every decision at this company? That seems a little bit risky. Secondly, are we at the curb with every decision right now?
Yeah, right.
Right? So it's a bit of a fallacy in our mind that we can control. We're trying to optimize for controlling and making sure nobody's naughty. But we haven't quite made the definition of naughty or fail designed to learn, number one. We also just genuinely, we aren't there. We can't be there. Doesn't matter how much headcount you get, you're not going to be there. Doesn't matter how many policies you write in the beautiful FAQ or even with Waze, they've got to choose to put Waze on. Right? Why do I turn Waze on every time I go to my children's school, even though I know the way? Because it gives me decision useful information, right? I know that it will give me something useful to help me get where I'm going to go. I don't put it on because Google told me I was required to, or Google made me the villain in the story and said, you're dangerous on the road, Hema, you better put this on. Google made me the hero in my own journey. They were just the Danny Ocean or the Ocean's 11, or the Dumbledore, right? Like they were a role in my agency, but they gave me a lot of agency to make decisions. I know trust feels like fighting words when it comes to the compliance arena, but it's the architecture of trust, right? Trust is not going to be just given. We shouldn't just give it, but it also just can't be taken away because we're afraid of the worst case scenario. And let's be real. A lot of what we do is we're focusing on the people that actually Chelsea very wisely carved out at the beginning of the session. Those people that intend it, we're not going to stop them, she said. And she's right. But how many of us create compliance programs to focus on them?
Right.
Right. And we have
this. It's a bad bet. It's a bad bet. It's not even a huge proportion of your risk. It's not even a huge proportion of your people, to your point.
And so what you do is you don't really reach them and you really piss off everyone else, right? How do we get to them? Oh, we do questionnaires and surveys and assessments and tests and compliance training with tests. We have to survey the whole to find out who are the bads. But have you ever done a test where you figured out who was bad in your company? No. What you did was you bothered everybody. And wouldn't it be nice? And I'll give you a real life example of this so it doesn't feel abstract. We do lobbying questionnaires. We want to make sure that if anyone's lobbying and there's a rule somewhere in America that means we've got to do something about that lobbying, we want to know. Great, makes sense from a compliance perspective. How do we know who's lobbying? Oh, well, we have to send the questionnaire to everyone, right? Every month. That's kind of crazy. Think about what I'm saying there. We're sending it to everyone to find out that a certain small percentage are actually in scope. Even if it's 3 questions, it's a disruption, it's a bother. Why do I have to tell you every month, I'm not bad, I'm not doing this, I'm not relevant? So we asked a question. having done some thinking space around this, a thinking game, we said, what would it look like if people had the capacity to let us know when they were in scope? Whoa, hold on a second. Now again, our insecure brains, our survivor brains would be like, yeah, that's just not going to happen, Hema. People need to be nudged. That's probably true. But it might also be true that there are new things we can do to allow people to know when they're in scope. There's an example of don't punish everyone just to get to the few. And this isn't bad behavior. This is just regular old, business. But we're bothering everyone to find out who we should bother.
Right.
That's what we're doing with compliance training as well. We're bothering everyone just in case the regulator says that person that went rogue, you hadn't bothered them. Come on, what are we doing? That's the question I think we can ask ourselves. I am not advocating throwing out the baby with the bathwater. As I said at the top of the call, the policies, the FAQs, they help create the conditions. The kids do need to be told, stop, look, listen the first time. They need to be told about speeds and distance and dangers of roads. We do have a role there, but I do think we actually have a role in this other place too, which is not crushing agency and thinking about capacity building rather than knowledge transfer. We're good at knowledge transfer. We're getting better and better. But what about practical wisdom? And we talked about the gray area at the top of the call. Well, remember those times when people don't have an answer, it's not in the policy? Yes, those times are getting bigger and faster. And honestly, we do test out now with our training. We thought we made them challenging, but 91% of people get them right. Is my win that I saved $1 million or so in seat time? Not really. What I should do is learn that if 91% of people already know this stuff, I've got to change it next year to make it something they actually need.
Yeah, do something new.
Right?
And, that's, I've talked about both of you guys now a lot, at least to my team. And I think both of you do this really well, and maybe it's natural, or maybe it's something that you kind of had a light bulb moment for at some point, but like making your program your own. There's no right way, what does a house cost? What does a car cost? Like, how do you raise your kids? Like, it's all different, and it's all going to be sort of circumstantial, and it all should be kind of a function of you applying your own agency, kind of to your point, on what matters most and what doesn't matter most, and that, after sitting with you for a while on our podcast, Chelsea, after knowing you for years, Hema, and like the inspiration you've been to my career and my company and everything else, it's really given me a lot of courage and to like double down on this concept of you have to make it your own. And, back to that, business decision rule or whatever, that jurisprudence thing you talked about before. I ain't a lawyer. All right. But like, if you can document it, if you can document your bets and you've been thoughtful about those bets, then you should feel comfortable making a bunch of different bets, and kind of the benefit not being right. The benefit is learning and getting tuition from things that go wrong, so you can really kind of drive that forward. So I absolutely love this. I told you guys, I say it's a treat every week, but I really meant it this time, if you can't tell. Okay. So I want to start with you on this question from Brittany, Chelsea, because this kind of relates back to something you were talking about a couple minutes ago. Do you have anything to add to that, or you want to go to this next question?
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm good. Moving on.
Cool. I covered it all. Very good. Me and Hema covered it. Perfect. Okay. In my organization, we're navigating the tension between legal precision our policies need to maintain and the clarity employees need to apply them in practice. How do you strike that right balance so that policies remain legally sound while also being clear, accessible, and effective in guiding ethical decision-making? Great question. Round of applause for Brittany for that phenomenal question. Let's start with you, Chelsea, on that answer, and then we'll go to Hema.
Yeah, so Brittany, great question. And I think it's something we all struggle with on a daily basis. I think one of the ways, and I'll just give an example from my organization of something that we've implemented recently was, right, we have a policy or part of a policy around, gifts and entertainment and conflicts of interest and bribery having to do with gifts, right? We have the policies. How do we get employees to understand how to apply those policies or rules? What can we do, right? So we have something now called a compliance quarterly newsletter, right? So every quarter we have a very bite-sized newsletter that goes to the employees by email that has, number one, we time it, right? So the gifts and entertainment newsletter will come before the holiday time, right? So it's sort of top of mind. Of course, it'll link to our policy, but it'll also give more of a, I said the word bite size already, but more of a digestible, quick reminder of what the rules are and what employees need to do. So it's easily digestible, it's timely, and it's sort of a reminder of what the rule is. So I think embedding those sort of bite-sized reminders throughout the year can be super helpful to, help employees make decisions in real time and not have them go back to try to find the 20-page policy that may exist.
That's great. What a smart idea. Again, that just takes a little bit of intentionality to map out the year and map out when this piece of media, this newsletter could be used to the greatest impact. And I think that's a really smart way to kind of balance the application against this sort of legal precision that Brittany alluded to in her question. Over to you, Hema. What would you tell Brittany? How would you add on to that?
So many exciting things. Sorry to interrupt you as well. So first, you said map out. So hold that MAP in your minds for a second. I'll come back to it. But before I do, Brittany, I would ask, what are we optimizing for? And in your question, I see you're actually trying to optimize for two things at once, which is legal rigor, defensibility. What do the regulators want us to have? Again, what we think the regulators are thinking. We're taking their turn in the decision intelligence gap here. But okay, you're also trying to optimize for practical wisdom and use. And so some of the things that you heard Chelsea say are trying to make it easier for them to get that. MAP, let's go to MAP. I love that word map, not just because I like ways, but also BJ Fogg, Professor BJ Fogg at Stanford. He's the guy that wrote Tiny Habits. He's also the guy that taught the creators of Instagram on how to make things sticky, because he's about persuasive technology and behaviors. So BJ Fogg says, behavior occurs when you have M, A, and P. Fun, huh? Motivation, ability, and prompt. Now, you've heard Chelsea, she's talked a lot about ability and prompts, right? And then there's the motivation piece. Why do I bookmark anything? I bookmark it because it was genuinely useful to me and I want to come back to it. So can we make the policies so genuinely useful that people will bookmark them and come back to it? That's the motivation. You don't want the motivation to really be, I'll fire you if you don't follow it. We do that, but it's not great. It doesn't last very well. We don't really enforce it well enough. So motivation, ability, make it easy to access. We talked about that. And prompt, as Chelsea beautifully said, at the right time. So I'd rather have it when I need it. That's why navigation comes in with Waze rather than an annual training. Amazing. Practical example. So we have policies trying to optimize, just like Brittany, for the two things. Also, there's a middle thing, which is what they need now, what they might need tomorrow, and what we want to show the regulator. So those three things we optimize for. At the top of the policies, we use a little bit of MAP. We say, what three things do you need to know? What three things do you need to do? We reduce the cognitive load, right? We make it more accessible, easier to remember. It's basic behavior science that I had to learn from professors like Professor Fogg, but make it easy, make it memorable, make it useful, have it at the very top. We do prompt them to look at the policies every year at least. And of course, we send them over if it's relevant. And then my teammate said to me, but Hema, if we only put those three things in, and we do have the big policy underneath it with FAQs and all the stuff, but if we only put those three things in, they won't read the rest of the policy. And I said to him, do you think they're reading the rest of the policy now? Right. That was an aha moment, right? They're not reading it now. But now that we've given them something genuinely useful and thoughtful, and I bring in these words intentionally, radically compassionate and curious and having empathy for them, they will see that. They will feel seen, heard, and valued. They will bookmark it. And then they'll know when they've got a question, you know what, there was a useful artifact that I can go back to. Or there was a useful team that wrote it. And that allows them to use the bigger piece. Remember, the second optimization was what they need tomorrow. And the third optimization, I think Brittany brought up beautifully, is the legal precision we need for defensibility. I mean, I could debate that a little bit because, again, you know, those lawyers, they're humans. The lawyers, the regulators, I mean, they're humans, just like us. So when you present to them with your very expensive lawyer, they would really like to see that you made it legible for them as well. Candidly, it doesn't have to be too much, but we've got the opportunity now. And then one last thing I'll say is many of you will be experimenting with chatbots now and policy bots. That means you don't have to make your policies that short anymore. What you have to do is make them readable for the AI bots.
Great
point.
So
go at it, have at it. Put all the things that you think are CYA and help you with the regulator in a longer policy that's readable for the bots. Just make sure that it's readable for the bot. Your standards of confidence have to be high, that it's answering the questions. And you can use a RAG, retrieval augmented generation model, so it's not hallucinating, but you can do that. But you can now write more detailed policy. So Brittany, I hope that gives you some optionality, the short bit for the behavior science, the longer bit for when they have to come back and they trust you now, and the even longer bit for the legal precision. You can have it all as long as you know what you're optimizing for under each piece.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of open to, or you're free to make those changes if you're willing to, question what those underlying assumptions are. Like that person on your team that said, well, then they're not going to read the whole policy. There was an sort of an unspoken kind of behind the scenes assumption that says like, oh, they're definitely reading something. Now, you know what I'm saying? Like he was assuming that they were reading the whole policy before when they probably weren't, kind of to your exact point.
Correct.
But if you're not willing to question that and you're not willing to enhance it, then it's always going to be that old thing, Right.
And imagine me saying to Google, you can't use Waze, then I won't read the highway code. What? You can't use Waze, then you won't read the whole Rand McNally of America. What? I don't need to read the Rand McNally of America or the highway code to drive.
Yeah, right.
What I need to do is know what I need for my turn to get there safely and strategically. And so I don't mean to be exaggerated, but it kind of makes it a bit more plain, right? Like, remember who you are. You're not providing them with what they need to walk and drive. You're providing them with a treatise, an absolute treatise of everything that could go wrong. Well, not even everything, let's be real. Like the things and have seen in the past that could go wrong. It's got nothing to do with the future uncertainties. So you're giving them this old map that you're saying they must digest and know and sign that they know it. And really, as Chelsea said, we need to make it navigable. We need to make it useful, decision useful in the moment they need it. And maybe, to your point, trust, build some trust that they come back when there's a new road. Build some trust that the transport regulator comes back and says, oh yeah, you did cover the roads you thought you were going on. That's okay. All three are okay, but it's not one or the other. And one last thing, if I may, sorry, because you said it. This is a bit delicious, really, if you think about it. This is not just about the brains and the behaviors of our employees. It's our behaviors and our brains. We need to make our own reasoning expectable. And if we keep coming back to, and you said it, and I said, we have to stop that. I was very aggressive in the chat. You said, well, what if I can't do this because cushions are cushions and I need to focus on the furniture, which is the policies and the things that I've been told to do. What if you just asked yourself a few questions like, #make it make sense? Is this fit for purpose now? The regulator is not telling you have to do that. The regulator is saying, take a risk-based approach to opportunity management. That's what it's saying. And if times have moved on, they'd be delighted to learn from you and tell the others to do what you've done. So we can be agents ourselves. We can have our own agency back. And I know a lot of us are scared to not do third-party risk management that way and not take the policy out and delete it. I know we're scared of that. Don't be too radical, but inspect your reasoning, take a bet, and you'll be safer, I think.
Yeah, make it your own. You know what I'm saying? Like apply these principles in real time. Take that risk-based approach. I just think it's very freeing, Chelsea, I want to go to you here. So, when you talk about, and Hema, I'll go to you after this. So, don't spend too much in the chat here. Okay, too much time. Okay. When you talk about compliance as a catalyst, as opposed to a cost center, like what does closing this gap actually look like? Is it a different mandate? Is it just a different method? Is it a different mindset? Like, how do we kind of evolve into this catalyst from this sort of cost center stereotype or moniker that many of us feel kind of, has been kind of applied to our programs?
Yeah, so it's something we talked about on the podcast the other day, which I think is becoming sort of a thought partner to the organization, right? So they don't design or complete a new project, and then as soon as they're about to hit go, they say, oh wait, let me get approval from compliance, right? We need to flip that on its head to say, I'm thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. Let me bring compliance in to discuss it at the beginning, right? Like, what guardrail should we put in place? How can we achieve this goal, or how can we complete this project in the right way? Right. So I think showing up as sort of a thought partner rather than a gatekeeper is huge. And I think getting yourself invited to meetings early on and jump on a committee and just sort of be involved in the process. That's how you can sort of guide the process and put those guardrails in without seeming, without showing up as the gatekeeper at the end of the road.
I mean, so much in that. I, would definitely tell folks to check out the most recent episode of the Ethics Experts with Chelsea, because we do go into that in depth, and a lot of the how. Chelsea, in our episode, we talked a lot about how you created the circumstances to be pulled in to those kind of decisions by building relationships in your organization in some really kind of smart ways, so that compliance can be like ways to, to Hema's point from before, like you said, Hema, Google is not pushing ways on you. You're pulling that into your life because of the value that has sort of provided you on a path that you've walked, or driven, whatever, before. And I think a lot of the how to kind of be pulled into those decisions, to your point, Chelsea, are kind of laid out in some really smart ways in that episode. So what would you add to Chelsea's answer there, Hema?
No, she's brilliant. It's exactly what we need to do. We need to really be thinking about that. What was the title of that episode? I want to watch it too. So, it's really going to be important for us to think about that. I don't know if I can add anything else. I'm going to let you get to your next question. Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about, we have about 10 minutes left here. Man, this hour went quick. Only 5 minutes left. So do you guys think that there are observable patterns or red flags that signal a decision is heading in the wrong direction before this misconduct or this bad judgment is made? Or are we kind of, unless we've laid that groundwork like Chelsea has done and like you've done, Hema, where you're kind of on average pulled into more decisions than kind of the average, program might be, are we always just kind of destined to be playing catch up and playing kind of, remediation? Let's start with you, Chelsea.
So I think there are certainly warning signs that we need to be aware of and will help us tweak or redesign our processes, right? So, there's a new third party there's a third party we want to do business with, right? Well, you hear people say, you know what, we've used that third party before, so it'll be fine now. Or, we're only using this third party once, or ordering from the supplier one time. So we don't need to go through all the hoops of doing, conducting due diligence, or, this tool is, this is going to take too long. The approval process takes too long. So we're going to do it this way instead. So I think there are things that people say that we'll pick up on to say, maybe this tool isn't right, or maybe this is taking too long, right? Or they don't know, how to escalate something. So I do think there are warning signs with language people use, and, in terms of sort of bypassing a control that's maybe too difficult or will take too long.
Yeah.
What would you add there, Hema?
Yeah, no, I think, I'm gonna say there are intelligent insights in the process if only we're willing to see them and listen to them. And one way you talked about this, I'm going to butcher what you said, Nick, but you said, if you inherited a thing, have we just inherited a thing, right? And yes, you are always going to inherit a thing. Unless you're starting the company yourself, you're inheriting a thing, and you're inheriting the brains and the decision-making, prowess or for lack of a better word, of the people that join. But you have an opportunity to reset. It's never too late. And one of the things I was coaching my team on just today actually was this, sometimes it feels like the weight of precedent and the weight of past practices comes to clash with your current efforts to keep things, on track. And it's up to them and us. And what I asked my team to think about was, well, could you just get on the same side for a second? And I don't mean the same objectives. So that's all hat. I mean, could you just laugh at how ridiculous it's gotten for a second together and bring the activation energy down? And then you can do two things. You can say, let's try and help you navigate the uncertain thing that you're trying to get done now. And then also, can I get some signals from you about how this is experienced in the field so that we can take it back to the bigger team and see how systematically we can fix this? So you have to be bold. You have to stop just trying to fix the thing in front of you and also look up. But you don't have to do it on your own, because the best signals of what's happening on the road, guess who that is? The drivers, right? The drivers have seen it all. They've seen it in their past place. They've seen it here. They go to bed at night frustrated. And all of that is really good, intelligent insight. So warning signs is one word. I'm going to be a little bit more radically positive and say intelligent insights trapped in the process that we could glean if only we allowed ourselves to widen our aperture, which means I can do both things. I can try to help you navigate this thing that I know is landing ridiculous on you right now. And we've got the history. We've inherited the wind. And then we've got to share the wind, right? We've got to say, okay, now what are we going to do with this wind? And where are we going to sail to next with this learning? That's designed to learn. It's very hard to do. People might say, I haven't got time for that because the next one's on my door. But it's a muscle, like everything, like walking a toddler. It's a muscle that you will develop. You will fall down a little bit. But if you're doing it together with the business practice, Chelsea's beautiful thing, be in the room at the beginning, be invited, get that trust early, earn that trust. Never too late to start for that. So I would resist anyone's survivor brain that's saying, yeah, but not in my organization, or yeah, not here. You've got agency, do what you can, and it will propagate. It will.
I have a shelf in my mind of like quintessential top tier compliance professionals, and Hema and Chelsea are absolutely up there. I have little dolls that look just like you in my mind. One thing you said, I know we're like right at time. I just want to talk about this one quick concept before we wrap up. This concept of boldness. You said be bold. Chelsea, you're a very bold person as well. In our episode, you talked about getting invited to meetings or inviting yourself to meetings, and that really allowed you to see a lot more of the lay of the land. Talk to me at least about, from your own mindset perspective, like how do you embody this boldness? What kind of frame have you put around this concept, which I think is like integral to becoming a quintessential compliance professional? How do you frame boldness in your mind, as opposed to, kind of the antithesis of it is the, I want to be polite. I don't want to step on toes. I can't change these things. This very passive mindset that a lot of us kind of feel trapped in for any number of reasons, our upbringing, the culture at our company, whatever. How do you kind of frame boldness? Because I want to hear, I want to pick your brains a little bit. Let's start with you, Chelsea, and then we'll go to you, Hema, and then wrap up.
Yeah, sure. So I think just sort of making yourself visible is the first step, right? I think if you come up with an idea or you want to be involved in something, the answer is always going to be yes, right? We talked about this on the podcast. How many meetings do you get invited to? Or if you want to get invited to meetings, let's say you want to get invited to 100 meetings, how many times are you going to hear no? 0, right? People will allow you to listen in and give your thoughts and give your, feedback and guidance whenever you want to, right? So I think if you just show up, get invited to meetings, and make sure that people around the organization know who you are, know how you can help them, and sort of what you can do for the organization, I think that goes a long way. That
usefulness, that drive to be useful, that others focus almost gives you permission to step into rooms that maybe you weren't sort of, you didn't get an RSVP card for, to your point.
I think that's right. I think sort of being the gut check person, I want to do this. Let me just get a gut check from Chelsea. It may not be compliance, right? But let's see what she thinks. That happens a lot. And I embrace that, right? And that's how you create this sort of boldness and visibility within your organization.
What would you add to that, Hema? Because I love this. We have to be more bold. We have to go and kind of take that land. We have to apply the agency that we're all kind of imbued with. How do you kind of frame boldness in your mind?
Well, you and I have talked a lot about mindset. So I'm going to go straight back into the decision intelligence gap. So I try to inhabit it. And what I do there is I give myself cool retrieval cues. Chelsea just used one of them. Moana, you know who you are. Lion King, remember who you are. Ted Lasso, believe. And on and on and on. Truth bomb, what else could be true? All the different coaching cues that are in my orbit. I told her I was watching Matilda. I went to the West End and took my kids to see Matilda the musical. And it's like, sometimes you've got to be a little bit naughty, like whatever, like take a retrieval cue and, debate with yourself a little bit. What's stopping you? And if what's stopping you is actually making you something you didn't want to be.
Right.
If what's stopping you is a fear of, upsetting the boss or a fear of not fitting in, allow yourself in a safe space, your thinking space, to question that. And then decide who you want to be and then move forward because you've taken a calculated risk. You know that you might be seen as self-promotional if you try to get into a lot of meetings. But the benefit of 95% of if you get there, you'll build trust and you'll have massive impact outweighs that 5% risk. Totally. And even if you can't control that 5% risk, but if you accept it, you can move forward. So boldness is not just luck. It's not intuitive. It's not instinct. It's not blind faith. It's actually decision intelligence in action. We're doing it anyway. All I'm asking for people is to experiment with it, make it inspectable to yourself.
Oh, I love it. Round of applause for Chelsea and for Hema. I knew I had high hopes for this one, and this was absolutely phenomenal. If anybody says compliance is boring, you know what I tell them? you're boring, because this is not boring at all. It's such an exciting place to be. Absolutely phenomenal episode. You can find more about Hema on, you definitely should be following Hema and Chelsea on LinkedIn. Hema is on the Great Women in Compliance podcast, one of my all-time favorite podcasts. So guys, thank you so much for coming. This was a phenomenal episode. I don't know if you can see the chat, but the chat was absolutely blowing up. Next week, we got a twofer for you because we love you. We have a healthcare episode on Tuesday. This is open for everybody because I'm a big tent guy, but we're going to be talking about reactive to predictive, how to rethink what compliance data tells us with Valerie Cloud. And then next Thursday, we got the one and only Matt Kelly, coolest guy in compliance, coming back, talking about scaling tone at the top, turning intent into global culture. So 2 more great episodes next week. Thank you guys so much. This was so fun. I'm leaving absolutely inspired. So see you next week.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
You got it.